Welcome in, everybody, to the West Side Sports Podcast. It is a wintry day here in Washington State. I am your host, Dakota Esri. With me, my man, my partner in crime, Travis Elliott. If you do us a huge favor, if you enjoy this conversation we bring to you today, as well as the ones previous and coming up in the past, please do us a favor, subscribe to the channel and leave us a like. We would greatly appreciate it. And if you know anybody who lives in the Pacific Northwest and likes just Generals, Seahawks, Mariners, maybe a sprinkle of Kraken if they decide to do something decent, we'll cover it. We'll be here for it. So we have some news today, finally. Some kind of news. We have a new QB coach in town for the Hawks. We have a new offensive line coach in town. And we have a signing for the Mariners. And yes, we are late to the Mariners signing, but we're getting this out. We're getting the content. It is Monday. We have been consistent. As we told you guys, we're going to be Monday content uploading.
Yeah, we don't Michael Jordan our way through flus around here.
No, so dude, let's just get right into it. New QB coach in town. I know you got some stuff on him. Go ahead and tell me about it.
Okay, so he was the quarterback coach. No, he was offensive quality control for the Bucks, 12-13. He went to Mercyhurst for a year, QB coach. Offensive control again with the Vikes. And then he stayed with the Vikes, assistant O-line, co-O-line, assistant O-line, and then a wideout coach, which I found to be interesting. That caught my attention. QB coach for 21, QB coach 22 through 24, basically. He ended in New Orleans. So we've seen some good things out of those teams, and he's got quite a bit of experience under his belt. I think we just need an adult in that room. Because, we definitely need help on that offensive front.
And for those
how do you feel about Andrew?
Yeah, and for those who don't know who we are referring to, his name is Andrew Janocko. He is the new quarterback coach here in town, replacing the gentleman who went to the Raiders to go with Pete Carroll. So this is Charles London. He was here for a while. Not to be disrespectful to Charles London, I'm sure he tried real hard and he gave it his absolute best here, which we would expect nothing less from somebody in a Pacific professional role, especially here in Seattle.
Right.
It's time for fresh blood, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
We have talked, and there was a lot of excitement and a lot of question about Sam Howell last year coming in, traded. We spent a third-round pick on Sam Howell. I wasn't real big on it at first. For everybody who's watching this, they're like, well, why didn't you not like Sam Howell at the time? He beat the Seahawks. I just thought he was like a smaller-sized Baker Mayfield. Not to be disrespectful, Baker Mayfield had a great year. He played better than Geno Smith this year because he went to the playoffs. It is what it is.
And when we called his card.
Yeah. But Charles London goes to Vegas. He follows Pete Carroll. Good opportunity there, kind of get a fresh set of, a fresh slate to work with. And Andrew Janocko, as you just stated all there, and then, by the way, if we're saying his name wrong in the comments, please let us know. We're not.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Janocko or Janocko.
But
the C makes me Janocko. But
it's an interesting fit. It does make sense, though. Yeah. He follows Clint Kubiak, coming from New Orleans, with a team and a roster that had a lot less weapons than we did. Like they had, Kamara, and they had Chris Olave, and Raheed Shaheed was a guy that came out of nowhere for them as a kind of a deep threat, option there at the slot receiver position. But Andrew comes in with a very established quarterback room. Not to be disrespectful to Derek Carr. Derek Carr is not Geno Smith, and some people are going to disagree. Right. And if you do, please let us know down in the comment section, man. Yeah. Geno Smith's been a top 15 quarterback by all stats in football the last 3 years combined.
That INT looks bad, but let's be honest, right? Geno Smith set 4 new quarterback records last year. Yes, he sent a lot of interceptions, and yes, we didn't go to the playoffs, right? But Russell Wilson took us to the promised land with less stats than that. Now we had the Legion of Boom. That's the fun thing about football, right? There's so many different avenues and different angles to look at the same problem. But quarterback, Geno Smith is a pretty damn good quarterback, man. And,
he is. He's talented. You and I, we can sit there and we have our screaming moments like we do with every Sunday with him because
we poured into him decision.
This year. But ultimately, at the end of the day, man, for me, what it comes down to is that you need somebody who can come in here And not saying that Charles London didn't have this, but we need somebody who can relate to Geno and these quarterbacks a little bit better. I feel like Charles London was more of like the Russell Wilson leftover piece of the puzzle that from Pete and all that stuff, which is obviously why he's following Pete back to Vegas. But with all that being said, man, the quarterback coach is one thing. The offensive line coach that's coming in, I think you and I are going to have a little bit longer conversation about this.
This is where we get a little bit more hyphy because, man, I guess we were just talking about this. It's been a decade, man, since we've had consistent, strong O-line play. You know what I mean? And you can talk about it all day long. The old hats, the new hats. I don't care when you've been introduced to football. You have to understand that it starts and it ends in the trenches. You know, everything that happens in the aftermath of that initial explosion, you know, big bodies all making contact with each other. What can you do on the outside of that? Now, not everybody is going to be able to take a broken play and fix it. You know what I mean? We were really lucky for at least a few years with Russell Wilson there. You know what I mean? But that's not typically how it works. You have to have a strong sense of self at the line. You're like, this is how we are going to control this game. You know what I mean? And obviously you're going to have to make adjustments in game, but I don't know. Maybe this isn't true, but I feel like we've been hurting for a strong O-line since Unger left. I don't think, you know what I mean? We've been trying to play cleanup, and you know what I mean? And I'm frustrated about this because, you know, John Schneider straight up, it's not logical to draft for the O-line. It's not logical to build the O-line in this way and in that way. And he's like, well, hey, you know what? We have stopped ourselves from being the team that we're supposed to be for 10 years now, simply because we haven't dedicated resources to the O-line. You know what I mean? If your O-line's weak, it comes down to, okay, I'm going to make the final point on, you know, Geno Smith set all those records. Yes, he had all those interceptions. But if you have clean O-line play, what happens? I would have liked to see that. He had the least average seconds per play in that pocket. You know what I mean? And if you're supposed to be good enough to make a decision quickly within that, but hey, you know what? If you're collapsed in the pocket within 3 seconds, you know what I mean? And all your receivers are covered up, what do you want him to do?
Right. And for those people who don't know who we're referring to again, his name is John Benton. He is the new offensive line coach who also was following Clint Kubiak from New Orleans. And I want to give a little shout out to Hawk Blogger, who does a great job there with all of his stuff. Brian Nemhauser, for those of you who don't know who that is, would give him a highly recommend. It's a lot of this, inside content that we kind of run off of is stuff that he brings to the surface because he's got a little more connections. Obviously, we do. But there was a 4-minute interview that he posted this morning as part of his show, and they were just asking him, what is your concepts? Like, what are the things you believe in? Like, what is your mantra, your motto, right? And he said, and I quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, this is the Spark Notes or Cornell version here, of course, for those of you who were back in the 2010 school days. We are not going to be focused on a physical ground and pound offensive line. We will be an athletic unit who will beat people to the punch and create holes first.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear that, the first thing my brain goes to is, okay, zone gap scheme running. We're not going to run halfback power. We're not going to run a halfback dive, a halfback sting, like traditional Madden plays. This is going to be an inside zone inside zone scheme run, right? Where you're going to pull a guard, you're going to pull a tackle, and something that you and I are going to get really excited about is that they said, and I am also paraphrasing here from that same article, or that same interview, was that there is going to be a fullback on this team. It's going to happen. Because that's what happens. When you have a zone run team, you need somebody who can create the initial hole to give the time for the linemen to go behind to create that zone to run through.
Duh.
It has to happen. We begged for this for years, man. It makes too much sense. The Baltimore Ravens have Patrick Richard and Derek freaking Henry, and they just run down the throat with this simple zone scheme where they just go straight downhill, pull a guard, and it's like, we dare you to stop us.
Yeah. I feel like we get caught up in the like in the skill players and stuff. You know what I mean? And the way that the defense is hybridizing their positions, you know what I mean? And the differences that the offense has to make to adjust to those things, you know what I mean? I feel like there's this blend that people need to remember, you know what I mean? It's like, yes, let's go to the future of football, and clearly things are changing and subtleties, you know what I mean, going down the road. But you also have to realize that there's the way football has been played, and successful teams have played in that way pretty consistently this whole time. You know what I mean? It's the line, and to us, when Mike McDonald came here, it was all about physicality. We want to be violent. We want to be this, So I got caught up in that. I'm like, that sounds awesome. So then I hear this guy come in. He's like, oh, we don't want to be aggressive and violent. We want to just play with technique. There's a little bit of reservation from me at first. And I'm like, well, I thought that's what the whole point was, I thought that was what Mike McDonald was trying to bring. But I don't know. I guess to temper that, it's like Mike McDonald chose to bring this guy in. And he's like, hey, can I bring my homies from New Orleans? He said, yes, that sounds good. You know what I mean?
Right.
So maybe more than the violence, he's a little bit more money. So we need to clean up our technique. You know what I mean? And, some of that was you shoved a rookie center in there. You know what I mean? You got guards coming in and out. People have been hurt for the last, even before Mike got here, right? Our line room was in and out. It was just people getting hurt, So,
and
I don't know.
We've watched plenty of offensive line coaches come in here, right? Andy Dick, after Tom Cable, right? When we actually had an established offensive line, and we talked about Unger, and we talk about Jermaine Ifedi for God knows whatever reason, because he couldn't do anything but false start. But they had like Russell Okun, and they had J.R. Sweezy, and they had an identity. We're like, hey, we're going to just absolutely punch you straight in the mouth, and you're going to have to deal with it with a running back who punches harder than we do. So, cool. We have an established running identity. And watching what the New Orleans Saints did last year with that absolute beast of Alvin Kamara, who is such an incredibly talented player.
And one of my favorite
However,
running backs,
he is
for sure.
off the field. It's a different conversation for a different podcast.
But as a running back. Ooh.
Yeah. It's you bringing in a guy, and you touched on this, and this kind of makes me think too, like, well, Mike said that he wants to be a physical ground and pound run and attack because he comes from Baltimore. And Baltimore has just done that for a long time. That's just the Baltimore Raven way, right? But at the same time, when you bring in somebody like Clint Kubiak, who has a specific amount of actual NFL OC knowledge, to me, it's like, okay, I took a risk last year with somebody coming in from college who was going to run this system that had transformed the college setting. So maybe it'll be like a Chip Kelly was back in Philadelphia. And obviously with Ryan Grubb, it didn't work. So with Clint Kubiak, it's like, okay, well, we have a system. We have a guy who has an established system, who learned this from his dad, who was in the league for 30 plus years. We're not going to beat around the proverbial bush, right? We're going to do what we need to do. And we're going to establish an identity and a concept and a mantra, right? We're going to run the ball. We'll run the ball, not with finesse, but with precise execution.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're looking at right now.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Well, and to your point, you have to consider the fact this guy's been an O-line coach for this will be his 22nd year now in the NFL.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, it says he was a run coordinator too with the Jets the year before last, right? So he does have some experience there. I mean, I want to be violent. You know what I mean? We when you and I watch a football game, we're barking. Go get them, boys. Rah, rah, rah. We get all hyped up and stuff like that. So who knows? Maybe that's just, we need to redirect a little bit. And maybe the violence will come hand in hand with that. If you're sound in your technique, you know where you're going, where you're going to do, that gives you ability. Now I can go and hit this guy. But if you have the technique, you'd be like, okay, I shouldn't blow this guy up. I'm going to chip him and then go and block for my running back or whatever. Or I'm going to go down the field and I'm going to block for my wide receiver, So I don't know. I'm definitely hopeful on that. I feel like we've started in the right direction. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm still, maybe it's foolish, but I still trust Coach Mack You know what I mean? If this was his decision, he knows what he wants, right?
Right, and one other little sprinkle thing here, and then we'll work our way from this into the Myles Garrett conversation. And I'm checking that because there's actually some breaking, not Mariners news, but some interesting breaking Twitter news that we're going to definitely talk about here. That's quite interesting from Jeff Passan. That's a little mini Passan bomb. But anyways, stay tuned to the end of the show because you guys are going to want to listen to hear about that. Frisman Jackson, who was the wide receiver coach here, has been retained. Right, okay. So that's kind of interesting because he's been really key in the growth of JSN. I'll be curious as to how that implies the DK Metcalf conversation, how that if that has anything to do with his extension coming in here. But when we talk about DK Metcalf, we talk about extension, and we're talking about the Myles Garrett conversation. This is something, at least to me, and I think you understand, we come on a similar plane on this, is I don't think that you really necessarily extend DK Metcalf before you know for absolute sure that either he's going to be here and wants to be here for the foreseeable future, or he can be an incredibly powerful trade chip to get you something that you really need somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a conversation about it, man.
Right. So, and for those people who don't know, the big news of the NFL so far today, this has been a pretty heavy the last 48 hours between basketball and NBA news, stuff like that. Myles Garrett has requested a trade out of Cleveland. He is sick and tired of the organization committing money to Deshaun Watson. For those who are Cleveland fans, our hearts go out to you. Sorry. This is a very poor time for your organization that your quarterback is who he is with all the guaranteed money and the ridiculous contract, and then now, without a doubt, the best defensive player. And he can be argued as the best player in football up there with Patrick Mahomes, right?
At least even though he's not the best defensive ends, man.
Is demanded trade.
Yeah.
So when we say Myles Garrett wants a trade out of Cleveland, the first conversation that comes up, or the first topic is, what's it going to cost you? Diana Rossini works for ESPN, has had multiple texts come in from GMs already this morning stating that the initial price, or they believe, is not going to be multiple first-round picks because it's not realistic, which quite frankly surprised me, considering that Myles Garrett has had 14 sacks the last 4 consecutive seasons and leads the NFL and TFLs. The dude's an absolute beast. He is who he is, right? What would you be comfortable giving up if you're like in Seattle, specifically for the Seahawks, where we stand today? What would you feel comfortable giving trading wise for Myles Garrett?
I don't know. I guess in a perfect world, I'd say second, third, and fourth. I don't want to give up 2 second-round picks. I just don't. That seems far too valuable to me. And we could. Maybe it's not immediate, but there's a question at the quarterback position because Geno's not a young man anymore. You know what I mean? And, but man, I mean, if you're going to talk about it, that somebody's going to want DK. If they're going to give up one of the best players at that position, they're going to bring somebody in who's good. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the contested catch rate for DK leaves much to be desired from last year because that was kind of like his calling card for the longest time is I'm just going to bully you for the ball. And then he didn't really do that. You know what I mean? And then, I don't know, as far as attitude goes, he kept it pretty clean on the field this year, so I can't complain on it that much. Yeah, I love DK Metcalf, dude. I like his physiology. Everything about that guy is awesome, right? But, you and I have had to take a step back and be like, man, does he really fit here anymore? Is DK Metcalf a liability? And that's a big, scary, nasty word. I hate to call him that. You know what I mean? But okay, so let's look at Jackson Smith-Njigba and just the explosion that he has been over the last couple of years, right?
Specifically, what I mean?
Year. Yeah, we're in a good spot there. The age conversation comes in if you talk about Tyler Lockett. You know what I mean? But we've got AJ Barner at the tight end position who was played out of his mind. Maybe not blow your hair back, but he was playing out of his mind last year. We're pretty good in the tight end room. We see that K9 has good reception skills. Like, I don't want to throw in the towel on K9, and I don't want to throw the towel on DK Metcalf. But if we're talking about how we want to clean up some positions, DK Metcalf is going to give you the opportunities if you trade him to fill those things, to realistically, instead of just saying, oh, we need to do this, this, and this, and be like, hey, we have the resources to do that now. We have the money to do that now, or you know what I mean? The draft picks or whatever. So I think it's worth the conversation, but I'm not ready to just be like, yeah, trade DK. You know what? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, DK Metcalf, his tenure in Seattle speaks for itself, right? All of the on-field penalties, his inability in his younger years to control his anger on the field is something you and I have had a big problem with. That he has gotten better in general, especially off the field. He has gotten better about it.
Due, man.
His fit on this team, I don't think changes. I don't think it's been slightened. I don't think it's been increased. He takes the top off of a defense. He's still that player that a defensive coordinator has to say, okay, we need a circle 14, and we need to make sure that we put two guys on him, or else he is going to burn one of the guys if it's single man coverage, unless it's like a Marshawn Lattimore or a Jalen Ramsey or like a Charvarius Ward from the Niners. Yeah, right.
So that's a great point, man. Because DK Metcalf has a presence that demands that you make a weakness in your own defense to try and keep him under wraps.
He's a playmaker. What I mean?
Absolutely, and that's a great point.
So, and I talk about this all the time, is that it seems like every the last, let's say, 4 draft classes, right? Maybe 5. I'm trying to think back as to the exact year that Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase came in, right? It seems like they just keep coming, right? And then Brian Thomas Jr. goes for the Jags, and all these kids that just come into the league and just tear it up. This is not actually a very great wide receiver draft class. It's like you might get, there might be 1 drafted in the first round versus a couple years ago there was like 3 or 4 or even 5. Someone's gonna get lucky and get a Cooper Kupp or get a Puka or get somebody who falls in a later round, right? But DK Metcalf, his value is, I don't think it will be any higher right now, because if you look at the wide receiver draft class and you look at the available guys coming in and their fit and like their contributions to the team compared to what you would get with a prime, legit in his prime DK Metcalf, then it's kind of almost a non-start conversation. Like, well, if his value is never going to be higher, why wouldn't you take advantage of that capital? But here's the hard part of this. And this is why I preface this whole conversation before we got into this whole point, is he has to sign an extension before he signs, or if he gets traded somewhere, they have to have an extension locked in previously, because the team's not going to want to trade for him and then have to figure out how to get that money and that deal locked up. They want that taken care of ahead of time. Yeah. So DK in this conversation is not going to stop for me. I'd give up. I would consider giving up like a DK Metcalf, a second and a 4th for Myles Garrett. I think that's pretty spot on, based upon the value and the name value of DK Metcalf and the quote unquote stardom changing between Myles Garrett and stuff like that and DK. I don't know how DK fits necessarily in Cleveland. If you think about it, they don't really have a wide receiver. They traded for Jerry Jeudy, who had a pretty strong end of the year, but he's not a number 1. So maybe DK Metcalf and Jerry Jeudy would be an interesting conversation to have a wide receiver kind of duo to build around with Deshaun Watson if they decide to keep him, or who knows? Maybe the Browns, after a bad year, just say, dude, we'll just give you the money, which I would highly doubt. I think it's more likely to get a winning lottery ticket than that happening. But and they draft a rookie quarterback. This is not a great class for it. Next year is going to be much better. But the conversation is going to continue, and it's something that we'll definitely need to monitor and keep our eyes on, because Myles Garrett is not the only name we've talked about. We initially talked about Max Crosby possibly getting traded. I don't think that's happening anymore because of Pete Carroll in Las Vegas.
It sounds like he really likes Pete Carroll's mentality. He seems excited.
So, I mean, when you get a guy of this stature, of this magnitude, who is like, okay, I want out of here, this is something we definitely will keep an eye on, and we'll see what happens. If there is a dream scenario for me, okay, there's like, for me, off the top of my head, there's 2 places he can't go. 1, The Lions. 2,
Please
Niners.
don't.
He can't go.
Yes.
It cannot happen. Because if
we got to keep the Niners down, bro.
Yeah, we can't we'll give them like a fresh Bosa to pair with, or a fresh guy like a Bosa's quality with Nick Bosa. That would not be good for us in the NFC West. And then for the Lions, when they get Aiden Hutchinson, if they have Aiden Hutchinson on one side and Myles Garrett on the other, and they get those 2 interior defensive linemen back, that's going to be a team that's going to be
night, nurse. Yeah.
So, with that being said, bro, we talked a lot of football. We're 25 minutes in. Now let's really get to what we really want to talk to.
Line. Okay, now we can move on.
Okay, yeah, let's bring us an offensive lineman that's actually in the top 10 for their position. Jorge Polanco comes back to Seattle. This was not huge surprise. This was brought to my attention. I didn't even see the initial signing because it was from Ken Rosenthal, and not to be disrespectful to Ken Rosenthal, I'm just not a big fan. But anyways, Jorge Polanco, Seattle, 1 year with a vesting option. I believe it's in the vesting option. He is back here next year unless the team agrees to give him the buyout. That's kind of how that whole thing works. So with that being said, $7 million, $3.5 million in incentives. We're looking at roughly about $11 million, 10.5 for Jorge Polanco. 216 average, 16 dingers, sub 700 OPS. Guy had a torn patellar tendon. Thoughts and feelings on Jorge Polanco back in Seattle?
I have no idea how he is going to work defensively on third base. I just don't know. I'm not saying that he's going to be bad, but I'm definitely not saying, I have full confidence he's going to be very good. You know what I mean? That's my biggest concern on this. You know what I mean? Yes, he was hurt actually quite badly all last year. You know what I mean? So I don't know. The weird thing about these conversations is how are we going to know until we see them in spring training? You just don't. But I'm saying if a one-legged baseball player hits 16 dingers and only makes, it only gets a successful hit at a 216 rip, man, that second leg's going to go a long way for you. You know what I mean? I don't know. I guess I should ask you the question. Has Jorge Polanco ever been a third baseman?
No, Jorge Polanco's always been a second baseman / fill-in shortstop. He might have played
I think it's perfectly understandable to be a little bit concerned about that.
Right, he might play a little bit of third base in Minnesota, but he was obviously primarily a second baseman, which is why he was regarded like the same level as Jose Altuve in his prime. He was a very talented offensive player, and I mean, the injury we knew when we watched him last season that something was definitely not right with him.
Yeah, and
I found this out. See here, today's Monday. I found this out on Saturday evening. I was listening to a podcast, and when the Mariners went to the Twins to start off early last season, like they somehow always make us do for some stupid reason. Let's go to Minnesota in the snow. I digress. That the reporters came up to Shannon Drayer and Angie Mentake and asked them, "So, how's Jorge Polanco's legs?" And they were like, "His legs? Because we just traded for him." Like, what do you mean? And they were just like, "Oh, you'll see." They had insinuated, they already knew that he was having issues, and this torn patellar tendon, this leg had been a problem for him for a couple of years, but he still was finding ways to grind his way through it, and for that alone is a hell of an accomplishment, man. You're a tough SOB to do that. Mm-hmm. But my brain goes two ways, right?
Okay.
Pathway number one is he was bad to start the season. He was really bad. I was advocating for Ryan Bliss and to get guys up here. We needed more athleticism.
We wanted literally anybody else at that point.
Yeah.
Full disclosure. It was why is he here every day?
Full transparency, dude. You and I were having Colton Wong flashbacks hardcore.
Yeah, we keep finding ourselves in that position. Oh, maybe they'll bounce back. Oh, maybe they'll be the back of their baseball card. And it's all on hope.
Right.
And hope isn't going to get your car down the street.
No, but Jorge Polanco to start the season, it was 515 OPS, bro. It was really bad, right? Second half of the season, he was plus 800. He was the Jorge Polanco that we remembered, and it made me think, did he get an injection? Did something? What changed, right? Well, what changed was, and some people are going to agree, and some people are going to disagree, and if you do, in the comment section down below, please, is that Edgar Martinez said, dude, we're not going to worry about hitting, spraying, the ball all over the field. If you see the fastball, hit the fastball right up the center of the diamond. When you do that, good things happen. And plus, and from that point forward, the team started to attack the fastball, and they took advantage of mistakes a lot better than they were previous in the year because they had a conflict of interest between the batting coach and the quote-unquote hitting coordinator, which was a complete joke at the time.
Oh, it was a huge difference almost immediately.
Yeah. So I like the fact that they brought him back because we've talked about Nico Horner, we talked about Hai-Song Kim, we talked about Ha-Song Kim, we talked about Jake Cronenworth, we talked about all these different guys, right? About who was going to fill the position, and we always said, well, there's always Jorge Polanco. If anything else doesn't, work out, which it's not a disrespect or not to be a disregard to him. He was the fallback plan, no different than Justin Turner is or Ty France right now is a first base still for them. I still think that's a reasonable option, but they still got to bring in bullpen guys and blah blah blah. But Polanco, brings the offseason grade from an F to a C- for me. I mean, Donovan Solano was a nice, fun, spark of energy for 45 minutes to an hour, and then it was nothing, and then it's okay, here's Jorge Polanco. Now we bring back a little bit of pop. Now we have the switch hitting, that bat that plays in that's really important into this lineup because besides for him and Cal Raleigh, there wasn't any other switch hitting guys inside of this lineup, so that really helps kind of deepen it in general. But I'm excited for it.
Good point.
It makes me think that with Barry Switzer coming in, or it's not Barry, Kevin Switzer from the Atlanta Braves, who says, look, we're just going to see fastball, hit fastball, see mistake, pay for mistake. It's going to be very simple baseball. Yeah. We're not going to make, complicated, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah.
I think it was overcomplicated. The CTZ focus was I think it was too widespread. People were instead of just making decisions, they had to make a decision on that decision. So. And it's you got less than a blink of an eye to hit that ball. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, overall, it's a welcome addition for this team. It brings a little bit of relief to know that we're going to have a legitimate MLB infielder filling a position. We're not going to have to rely so heavily on these kids, which is something you and I have talked a lot about with our frustration about why we still think the reason why Jared Kelenic never succeeded in this town was because he had all the pressure put on him and we'll just put him at leadoff and he's going to figure it out. He's going to be great, blah, 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 blah. And obviously everybody knows what happens with JK. But
no, you kicked him into his own head and he never came back out.
I want to talk about this, and then we're gonna end here because this bomb little interesting report came out.
We like Jeff Passan a lot.
Yeah, I love my Passan, right? So, and for those who aren't a big fan of just reading scripts, apologies, but this is something I need to read because it's a little lengthy. Breaking news per MLB. Umpire Pat Hoberg has been fired, and for those of you who don't know who Pat Hoberg is, he is one of the top 5 umpires in Major League Baseball. He has been fired for sharing betting accounts with a friend who bet on baseball games, though there was no evidence that Pat Hoberg himself manipulated or that he worked on any of his games. He also deleted messages central to MLB's investigation. So, when we talk about the integrity of the game, right, something that you and I talk about a lot is that we want to keep this game pure because this game is America's pastime.
Yeah.
You can't help but when I read this, what the hell, man? You were literally in my opinion, I thought he was the best umpire, maybe top 2 in baseball because he was consistent with the strike zone. He was crisp on the corners. It wasn't a Hernandez, Angel Hernandez situation where the strike zone was the size of Texas and California combined.
Just an amoeba.
Yeah.
Strike zone was an amoeba.
Dignity. You had respect. You had things you had earned. And then now, so what we say, obviously, and there's this expression, where there's smoke, there is fire.
Typically, yeah.
And if MLB said, we've done our investigation and you're fired, that means you did something that you were told not to do.
Right. It's the simplicity of it for me. That's what you were told not to do a thing.
Right.
And then you did the thing. Consequences, bud. It's the same for a 6-year-old child.
No, and that's just the way it is. And it's
maybe he didn't do anything, but the fact that he deleted evidence, that's gonna put you in a bad light.